Hey, it's Tomskark11 with another guide explaining some of the more behind-the-scenes details of features in Xenoblade X for whether you're a new player or a veteran that just never needed to know how to bake bread in order to eat it. Last time I went over the mechanics of divisions, and today I'll be covering everything about how Frontiernav works. To quickly start with the basics of what Frontiernav does, when you plant a probe on an FN site, you get resources from that site on a real-time timer, ticking every 5 minutes for ores labeled as precious resources, every 15 minutes for revenue aka money, and every 30 minutes for moranium. The tick for precious resources will get replaced by moranium when it ticks, and all timers will pause when in menus, cutscenes, or dialogue, basically anything that also pauses the in-game clock. Additionally, they pause if you leave the game AFK for 30 minutes, so you need to do something at least that often if you intend to AFK farm resources. You naturally will want to discover and plant as many probes as you can as soon as you can. On to the details. First off is the probe sites. These come with ratings for the categories of mining, revenue, and combat. They'll also display which ores can be obtained from that site. We'll go over combat later since it's kind of its own thing separate from the economy system and doesn't become relevant until mid-game. For mining and revenue, the ratings correspond to a base amount of moranium and money that you receive each tick. You can see those amounts on screen. Then for the probes themselves, every probe will add a modifier to the base value of that site. The basic default probes apply a 50% modifier, cutting the base values in half when initially unlocking a new site. And except for basic ones, probes of the same type chained together will multiply their effects by 30% for a chain of 3 to 4, 50% for a chain of 5 to 7, and 80% for a chain of 8 or more. For what the different types of probes do, first we'll go over the most common one, mining probes. Mining probes go from Generation 1 to Generation 10. Gen 1 gives you the full base amount of moranium that basic probes only give half of. Each subsequent gen adds a 20% modifier increase until Gens 9 and 10 that add 30%. They all reduce revenue to 30% of the base value compared to the 50% of basic probes. Next is research probes, which are your primary way of making money in this game, and they make it so easy that you'll have way more than you ever need, but at least there are things to buy here unlike in Xenoblade 3. Research probes go up to Generation 6, with Gen 1 doubling the base value of a site, or quadrupling compared to the default, and each subsequent gen adds 50%. Additionally, if a site has a sightseeing spot that's been discovered, a flat bonus of 2,000 credits is added per sightseeing spot, increasing by 500 credits for each level of research probe. Storage probes. Each storage probe will raise moranium storage capacity by a flat 3,000 regardless of site rating, but they do get the chain bonuses. This means low-ranked sites will be the most effective use of storage probes as they don't have as much value for other probes. This also means Oblivia makes for the best region to run a layout of storage probes. Having a good layout of storage probes is very important as your mining increases and you need increasing amounts of moranium for things. Storage probes are obtained from the Professional, one of the tutorial missions, the chapter missions for chapters 3, 4, 6, 9, and 11, the missions Planetary Pioneer Part 4 available after chapter 8, and Part 5 available after chapter 11, completing the Cauldros Collectopedia, a treasure chest in Cauldros south of FN Site 514, and a treasure chest in Sylvalum's Cavernous Abyss, which requires flight. The next probe types are most powerful when used in combination. Booster probes. These will independently multiply the effects of every adjacent probe by 150% for Gen 1 and 200% for Gen 2. These are especially useful to place at junction points between multiple probe connections to boost as many probes as possible at once. And then Duplicator probes. These will copy the effects of every adjacent probe at the cost of not counting for chain bonuses to any of them. Once again extremely useful at junction points, even more so than booster probes, as they can effectively become up to 4 probes all planted in a single location. This includes duplicating the effects of booster probes, which will also be boosting any other copied effects of the duplicator probe as well when they're next to each other. List of the locations for booster and duplicator probes from the wiki pages on screen. Now, you can already figure out how powerful these are without me doing the math for an example, but I can show you without having to do any math with this interactive map. Let's say you have 5 chained storage probes. With the chain bonus, each one is adding 4,500 storage for a total of 28,500 because the base is already 6k. If we add a duplicator probe, it adds 3,000 because it lacks the chain bonus, but then we add a booster probe, doubling the effect of the duplicator and applying a doubling effect to the adjacent storage probe, taking that from 4,500 to 9,000. Add another booster probe to this junction to turn that doubling into a quadrupling, making it go over 9,000! You can do this with multiple different probe effects at once too by connecting them to the duplicator. I think you get the idea. Link to this interactive map in the description if you want to play around with it yourself. And lastly, we get to the combat support probes. There's 5 types, but they all work the same way. They grant a permanent buff to your party while you're within the region the probe is set in, or in the case of one of them, it's instead a debuff on all enemies in that region. The rank of these buffs is determined by the number of probes in the region together and the combat support rating of the FN sites they're placed at. Combat support rating of B provides a rank 1 buff, A provides a rank 2 buff, and S provides a rank 3 buff. These will stack. For example, an A and an S together will give a rank 5 buff. The chain bonus for these is to just increase the total rank by 1 level, and the buffs only go up to rank 5, with rank 6 being unused. If this has been found to be changed in Definitive Edition, that will be noted in a pinned comment. So because of that, chaining these is actually unnecessary. You can get the max rank from just 2 probes of a type if placed in the right locations. And since you can only get 3 of each combat probe, this is valuable so that you can spread them around regions more, but the most effective way to use these is to just move them around to different regions as you need them anyway. For what these buffs are then, the exact values for each buff rank are up on screen. We have ranged and melee attack probes that boost the respective attack stats. This is added together with the same effects from any auras or regular temporary buffs. Fuel probes that increase the rate of fuel unit recovery of parked skells that are not being piloted. Attribute resistance probes that add to all 6 sphere resistances at once, reducing all damage taken. I might do a separate video on attributes to go further on how this works. And easy debuff probes that apply debuff resistance down to all enemies in the region, making the chances of inflicting debuffs much higher, in a game where debuffs are actually usable and really good, by the way. That's everything you need to know about Frontiernav. If you want recommended probe layouts, the interactive map I showed earlier comes with a preset layout you can use as a basis for your own, adjusting for what you have available, or if you want to further maximize storage, and letting you test layouts without going through changing probes back and forth in-game. That's linked in the description. If there was anything I forgot about, leave it in the comments, and if there's been any updated information discovered with changes in Definitive Edition, I'll have a pinned comment for that. And let me know what other mechanics you want guides on. On the left, you can find a playlist with mechanical guides on all the Xenoblade games, including one on how divisions really work in X. If you're watching this at a future point, there'll be other guides on X in there too. So, see you next time!